let's just jump right in. Let me just advance the slide here. Before we get into the details of Swift Current, I do want to lay the foundation with just a little bit of background on the Flood Mitigation Assistance Program, or FMA for short. The FMA program makes federal funds available to states, U.S. territories, federally recognized tribal governments, and local governments to reduce and eliminate the risk of repetitive flooding and flood damages to structures that are insured under the National Flood Insurance Program and within NFIP participating communities. The FMA grant program has been authorized by several legislative acts, as you can see on the left side of the screen. Most recently, we've had an influx of funding through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act of 2021. We were very excited about this because not only did this infusion of funding allow us to actualize Swift Current through an initiative in FY22, but also allowed us to continue Swift Current through national rollouts in FY23 and FY24. As well, another highlight that we really like about the IIJA is that it has allowed us to offer an enhanced cost share beyond what is available in our FMA program. And we'll get into that a little bit later. I'm just going to head to the next slide here. So this slide here is meant to show how Swift Current can work with other FEMA hazard mitigation funding opportunities. So as you know, New Hampshire has had several disaster declarations in the last couple of years, and Hazard Mitigation Grant Program is the main mitigation funding program post-disaster. With Swift Current, we've also been able to add a flood mitigation assistance program. It's not Stafford Act authorized, but we did design Swift Current to be disaster activated to really align with the post-disaster survivor experience that is filing a claim or experiencing substantial damage, experiencing repetitive flood losses, to be able to quickly move forward with a mitigation decision on their structure. So here you see what are our Swift Current goals. We really have four foundational pillars that we have used to be our North Star as we were designing Swift Current. This is speed, equitable outcomes. We want to ultimately increase resilience within our across the nation. And then also, because we are with flood mitigation, we have a direct linkage to the National Flood Insurance Program. So we want to reduce those future flood claims against the NFIP with repetitively flooded properties. A lot of folks ask, well, what's really the difference between Swift Current and annual FMA? Because Swift Current is so very new, or we have applicants that just aren't very familiar with flood mitigation assistance to begin with. They just haven't really applied for much on the FMA annual side over the years. And so we definitely want to cover a little bit of what those differences are, or really what bubbles to the top of the main differences between the two funding opportunities. So our annual flood mitigation assistance program is it's an annual grant opportunity. It's a nationwide competitive process. There is one open application date and one closing date. All applications come in. They are all reviewed through a complex selection process, and then selections are made, and the selected applicants are notified of their selection. With that can lead to a longer process. We also with FMA annual program, there's also more eligible projects types like capability and capacity building activities, localized flood risk reduction projects, and individual property flood mitigation type projects as well. And our annual program is also for all NFIP insured properties. So if the projects benefit the NFIP, meaning they serve NFIP insured properties, then it qualifies to be submitted under the FMA annual program. Now, when we shift over to Swift Current, hopefully what you see is we've narrowed the aperture of what is eligible under Swift Current, and we've done this again with those foundational pillars in mind. So we have activation criteria for Swift Current. It's an activation-based funding opportunity for flood-related disasters that occur between June 1st of 2024 and May 31st of 2025. We have very specific application timelines for each activated applicant, so they vary throughout the year. They're either a 4-month or a 5-month period. For the eligible project types, we're looking only at the individual flood mitigation projects here um, for uh, for properties on the ground. For eligible properties, we've also narrowed it down from that overarching and all NFIP insured properties category to we're looking very specifically at properties that are NFIP insured as well as being either FMA or NFIP defined repetitive loss or severe repetitive loss, or they have been substantially damaged by flood after during the event. So as you can see, we've really narrowed down Swift Current, all designed to come under those foundational pillars uh, for the funding opportunity. I'll go ahead and move forward. So some of the key changes, New Hampshire did have an activation in FY23, and we learned so many lessons from the implementation at the state level across the nation in FY23. And we took those lessons and we incorporated them into the design of FY24 Swift Current, which is what this new activation is for the state of New Hampshire. For the first round of in FY23, we were in e-grants. We have since moved over to FEMA Go. So for any applications and sub-applications that are submitted under this FY24 Swift Current activation will come in through FEMA Go. We've also, for the applicant level, so this would be for the state, at the state level, we added project scoping as an eligible activity. We heard very loud and clear that because our timeline is very aggressive and there's an expectation to move quickly, a lot of applicants had made comment that they didn't have a resource they could tap into very quickly. So what we did is we made this project scoping available. It's up to 1% of the maximum set aside for our states that they can apply for basically immediately upon application open to have a ready set a funding resource to tap into in order to identify projects if they do anything that would develop projects to help move Swift Current along. We also added subsequent activations. So we really added this because we didn't want to limit the opportunity for any particular applicant that may have a flood-related disaster declaration, say at the beginning of the time period. So say they had a disaster in June. Well, because our timelines are shortened, that opportunity would end about 6 months into the year. And if they say they had spring flooding in FY20 or in 2025, say March or so, if we were a one and done program, they would no longer qualify for a Swift Current activation. And we didn't want that to be the case. So we added in the subsequent activation possibility and element into our funding opportunity. We also originally in FY23, we had a 30-day, what we called an administrative period from the disaster declaration to when the application period would open for that particular applicant. We heard loud and clear, this may be a little too quick. And so we did extend that to be 60 days just to give a little bit more cushion of time to get things set up and to start working on some of those preliminary activities to get ready for Swift Current there. Okay, just wanted to dive a little bit deeper into the actually activation, how we determine that, and then how we determine the maximum set aside and application open window length of time for our qualified Swift Current activation. So the left side of the screen is the actual activation criteria. So this is how we determine if we will activate an applicant. So again, we start with that flood-related disaster declaration between June 1st of this year to May 31st of next year, and then we look at the flood insurance claims activity of the state. If the applicant has at least $1 million in claims in the 12 months prior to the declaration date, that meets one criteria, and the applicant can meet any of these three particular criteria, or the flood insurance claims activity is very high, and there's at least 500 flood insurance claims that have been submitted within the declared flood related disaster event. Or if the applicant is a U.S. territory or federally recognized tribal government that is applying directly to FEMA, all that's required for that particular category of applicant is the disaster declaration. So once we're able to basically make it through this door, then we have to look at okay, well, how much funding and what's the application period going to look like for this applicant that has met all the criteria for activation. I won't go through the details of the table. There's a lot of words there, but as you can see, we have different categories based on, again, the flood insurance claims activity that's going on within the state. So keep this in mind as we go to the next slide. And we like to be very transparent with SwiftCurrent. So we want our regions, our FEMA regions and our states to know the information that we pull to determine their activation and their funding amounts and application windows. So I've summarized it here. We're looking at New Hampshire's disaster event 4799 that was declared on July 10th of this year for severe winter storms and flooding. The incident period was back in April. You may be saying, hey, well, I thought it had to be from June 1st. We look at the actual declaration date, not the incident period for activation. So that's why New Hampshire is activated under FY24. We looked at prior claims from July 10th of last year to July 10th of this year. Over $11 million in claims for 281, and the CWP is claims that are closed with payment. So it's quite a bit of that's a high number for flood insurance claims activity there. So that met the 1 million in prior claims criteria for activation. We also took a look at claims and event because we do want to kind of see what's going on there. For that particular event, there were only 2 claims submitted at that time. But that's okay because New Hampshire met the activation criteria under prior claims with that 11 million. So we'll step over to the right side of the screen. And again, we went over to the table, if you think about that previous slide, and we found the category where New Hampshire fell in. So it met at least the 1 million in claims for activation. And then because of the 11 million claims, New Hampshire stepped up in category to have more than $5 million in prior claims. So that increased the amount of funding that will be set aside for New Hampshire to be $20 million maximum set aside with a 4-month application window. That application window begins on September 10th and will go through January 10th of next year. So the big takeaway here is that there's $20 million, and I want you to look at that wording that we use. That's the maximum set aside. That means this amount of money is set aside and put on hold for the state. We are reserving this $20 million for the state of New Hampshire until January 10th of 2025. We want the state and the communities to be able to work with certainty as you're having conversations with property owners. That's that non-competitive element of SwiftCurrent. Because we know how difficult it can be to tell a property owner, hey, we have this mitigation program, but we have to compete for it, and it might be a very, very long time before we even find out if your project is selected. So hopefully we've taken that uncertainty out with having this maximum set aside and this abbreviated application window. All right. Wanted to just go over a little bit of where we are in the overall process. So steps 1, 2, and 3 have happened. That all those are all things that happen behind the scenes. We are well, the major flood disaster declaration. We work with our FEMA declarations unit who notifies us of new declarations. We are running all the flood insurance claims monitoring behind the scenes, and then we notify the regions, and then the regions notify the eligible applicants of their activation. So now we're moving into step 4. So step 4 will be starting on September 10th because that is when the application window opens, and then moving through step 5 of that'll be January 10th of next year when the application window closes. So all during this step 4 and step 5, those are when those applications and sub-applications can be submitted. And you don't have to wait until that expiration date of the deadline date of the application window. Those applications can be submitted anytime during this process. And we actually encourage that. If at the community level, if you have a property owner that is, I am very interested in this, I would like to do this, and you work with them to prepare and submit a sub-application, we encourage the state and the region to submit those and review those quickly and make awards as soon as possible so that we can see that mitigation on the ground for that property owner. Right, I'm going to keep on moving here. So I wanted to talk and just go a little bit deeper into the Swift Current eligible activities. We've said the word project scoping and we've said the words individual flood mitigation projects, but what does that actually mean? We talked about project scoping quite a bit. That's available at the state level. So unfortunately not available at the sub-applicant level yet, but uh, but for FY24, that's available for the applicants. So getting down into the individual flood mitigation projects, we have several types of activities that can happen under this category: structure elevation, property acquisition, structure demolition relocation, mitigation reconstruction. Those are the 3 most common types of mitigation we see for individual properties. But there's also a few other things. The dry flood proofing of historical residential buildings or non-residential buildings. There's structural retrofitting of existing buildings, some non-structural retrofittings as well. So there's a lot of options here that folks can take to reduce the risk on their structure and their property. Now, I know I said this previously in the presentation, but when we're looking at the actual structure itself, it must fall within one of these categories. Must be FMA, severe repetitive loss or repetitive loss, NFIP, severe repetitive loss, repetitive loss, or substantially damaged from flood in the event itself. And then just a quick note there, all structures must be NFIP insured to be eligible. So I wanted to just cover just a little bit more on what some of the requirements are for our 3 most popular mitigation activities: the elevation, mitigation, reconstruction, and then the acquisition and demolition. So again, the community must participate. The community where the project is happening must participate in the NFIP and be in good standing. All structures that are in the sub-applications, they must be insured under the NFIP before, during, and after the mitigation. And then they've got to meet those particular categories of SRL or RL or be substantially damaged. And then the big takeaways on those last 2 major bullets: the elevation and mitigation, reconstruction, and NFIP policy must be maintained for the life of the structure, regardless of whatever flood zone that property is in. So even if the property is in an AE zone, but it moves to maybe an X zone in the future, it still has to carry that flood insurance policy. And then for acquisition and demolition, the policy must stay with the structure until the transfer of property has happened, and then that policy can be released at that point. Oh, Oh, cost share. This is one of the most exciting things that I feel like I get to share with FMA and Swift Current. For those properties that are classified as FMA defined SRL or RL, we have an enhanced cost share for those particular properties. If it's an FMA defined SRL, it's up to 100% federal cost share. This is a pretty good deal, and these are our most repetitively flooded properties that we see that fall into this category. And then if it's an FMA defined RL, we can offer up to a 90% federal cost share. So really, really great opportunities exist for these properties that fall into this category to have mitigation, to complete mitigation, and have up to 100% of that be funded from FEMA. And then because we are under that IIJA funding, if we have a property that falls into a census tract that has an SVI CDC score above 0.5001, we can also offer that property up to 90% federal cost share. So, and we can run these checks on these properties. If communities, if you have a list of properties or the state has a list of properties that are interested in Swift Current, or just are wondering about the properties in the community that may fall in this category, we can help with that on the headquarters side. Then on the right side of the screen, we still have the 75-25 split for federal, non-federal cost share for those properties that don't fall into any other categories. So I had mentioned that we can help with some of what we call it property validation, and determining if properties, they have that policy, they are RL, SRL, or what SVI census tract they fall in. We can help with all that. So that's a major example of some of this tailored pre-application support that FEMA can offer for Swift Current implementation. And we call it tailored pre-application support because it is exactly that. We are very excited that we have contractor support that we can tap into to basically help a community or the state bust through any barriers that is keeping them from submitting a sub-application or an application. And that's what we want to do. So when you think about this, if anyone's familiar with the BRIC direct technical assistance, this is very similar to that, except you don't have to apply for it separately. All you have to do is ask, and you can ask through your state and region for assistance, and we will most likely have some kind of conversation, determine what exactly is needed and how best we can help in that area. Some of the examples of support that we can provide are sub-application development, again, identifying those parts of the application that may be confusing or that you just may need help with. We can link to a subject matter expert to walk through those things, to help on that front. FEMA Go support, we do offer that as well. Benefit cost analysis support. We understand this can be timely, it can be complicated. There are various tools out there, and not everyone is versed in those. And so we can go to our contractor with our subject matter expertise there and our technical support and work through different benefit cost analysis areas where we can help in and utilize all the tools that we have at our fingertips, whether this be pre-calculated benefits, narratives for the under $1 million projects, or running the full tool itself. Policyholder outreach. One item here that we are again, I've been saying we're excited. I'm just generally excited about Swift Current every day. But one thing here on this policy outreach support is that every property that is categorized as an NFIP severe repetitive loss, that if that property has a flood insurance policy, that policy is written through FEMA's NFIP Direct. And so, because of that, and because FEMA owns that relationship, we're able to leverage that and directly communicate with that particular property owner, meaning that we can send the NFIP Direct can send correspondence to that particular property owner, letting them know about this opportunity. And so that is something that if a state would like to do, a community would like to do, we can definitely make that happen. It's a succinct letter. It's about 3 paragraphs, and it just says, and we have some template language that can be used, and basically says we have Swift Current available in our state. These are the things that you could possibly do for mitigation. If you're interested, please reach out, fill in the blank, contact number. So we're very happy we can offer that to, again, directly get to property owners that would be eligible for Swift Current. Speaking of reaching out to individuals, we know that a lot of the information that we share has PII in it, which is private personal information. And FEMA is, we have very specific rules that we need to meet. And before we can share this information with just anyone, we need to protect that information. And so we protect that through only sharing the information with entities that have a data sharing agreement, or an information sharing access agreement, or ISAA. You may have heard it referred to. Many communities have these, many states have these already in place. If you don't, we do work with our floodplain management division at headquarters, who owns that approval process, and they have agreed to expedite data sharing requests that come in for Swift Current. So again, another example of how we can help there. Also, on the environmental historic preservation front, again, you heard me introduce Jessica Stewart from our FEMA headquarters staff. Every region also has EHP staff, and I know every state has historical preservation offices as well. So there's a lot of resources to tap into here if there's any kind of barrier that is encountered regarding EHP. So those are just some examples. Again, we call it tailored because it really is. If a community or a state is just saying, "Hey, I could submit this application, but XYZ," we want to know what the XYZ is, and we want to help get through that so that that application could be submitted. Okay. I did want to talk a little bit about management cost under flood mitigation assistance. I know a lot of applicants under some other mitigation programs of FEMA see a 100% of federal cost share on management cost. And FMA is a little bit different. Unfortunately, we are unable to have that 100% federal cost share. So these next couple of slides will take you through an example of what that looks like. So at a high level, for Swift Current, an applicant's management cost is up to 10% of the aggregate of all total sub-application budgets, and it is inclusive of the maximum set-aside amount. So a lot of words to basically say you can apply up to 10%. Applicants, so that would be our state level, can apply for up to 10% of the sub-application budgets that are being submitted. And whatever that management cost is, it will not go above and beyond the maximum set aside. So whatever the management cost is at the state level would need to be incorporated into that $20 million set aside. It can be kind of tricky to calculate. So the next slide, we kind of go through a calculation example for you. So I hope it will help as we go through it. Let me jump to the next. So again, at the applicant level, so in this example, we had 3 sub-applicants that submitted projects, and each sub-applicant's cost share is indicated in the table. So we have a few different federal cost shares that come in. So again, super excited for the enhanced cost share that we're able to offer under FMA and within IIJA funding. So we look at that first column and we see we have 3 sub-applications and there's varying federal cost shares. there that come in for the projects. In the second column, so we do the calculation on that total project cost. So the applicant can request up to 10%, and we of the 5 million in our example here. So total management cost here is going to be 500,000. So then we get to the part where we have to kind of figure out, well, what's my cost share of that, because it's not 100% under FMA. So in that third column, the total federal cost share for all of the sub-applicants is calculated as a percent. So as you can see, we work through the different the different federal cost shares for each of the sub-applications that have come in that are a portion of the total. And then in the fourth column, the aggregate non-federal cost share for all sub-applications is calculated as a percent here as well. So as you see at the bottom of columns 3 and columns 4, the aggregate federal cost share for the sub-applications is 94.6%. The non-federal cost share is 5.4%. So we carry those over to what the federal cost share would be on the management cost of that. So I'll sit on this slide for just a little bit, and just a reminder, this example covered the management cost and the federal non-federal cost share for applicants. Sub-applicants can request up to 5% of the total project cost for management cost. For example, a sub-applicant submits a sub-application with a total project cost of 500,000. The management cost of that could be up to 25,000. We take that 5% times the 500,000. It's equal to 25,000. And then the sub-applicant's federal cost share of their management cost is the same as the federal cost share of the total project cost of what they're submitting. So if the sub-application for the project has a 90% federal cost share, the sub-application management cost will also have a federal cost share of 90%. And just a reminder for our sub-applicants, we have seen sometimes just in the thick of things and we're moving quickly, sometimes sub-recipients may forget to include that sub-recipient management cost within their sub-application. So just a reminder, if you're interested in that, in adding that, you'll want to add that as a line item to your budget and scope of work as well. So hopefully that takes a little bit of the mystery out. We understand this can be tricky, a tricky part, but the folks, Marcus and Tim, I know are more than willing to help on this front, as well as Austin and his staff at the state. I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into the data sharing agreements, because this can be a huge barrier when communities are trying to discuss or even identify potential property owners for Swift Current. So we do encourage that if your community does not have a data sharing agreement, perhaps that be one of the first things that you seek out, so that you can have this information. There's a couple of different data sharing agreement types. There's the routine use letter. Those are for one-time request. I don't necessarily recommend this particular one, just because I think data sharing agreements are great, and you may have future use of wanting to request additional information as you work on other things within your community. So I really suggest seeking this information sharing access agreement, or ISAA. Those are multi-year agreements, and they can be used for repeat data request. So typically, communities will work with the FEMA Regional Flood Insurance Liaison to go through this process. So definitely recommend reaching out to Marcus and Tim to get that started if that's something that you think your community needs, and that would be great. So I just have a couple of additional slides to go through before we head into a Q&A. We did take some top level items that we really saw that were helpful, and created a little bit of a checklist. It's not all encompassing by any means of everything that each of these different levels of levels could do. So our property owner, we do have a Swift Current policyholder one pager to get a little bit more information. Again, making sure we always want people to have flood insurance and cover themselves financially for flood damages. And if they are interested in Swift Current, then definitely confirming that their policy is effective and if it's going to be renewing anytime soon, that it definitely does get renewed to maintain eligibility for Swift Current. I won't read through all of these, but again, we have some things the policyholder or homeowner could do, or even that doesn't even have to be just a residential, it could be a non-residential property owner as well. Some things that the local government can be doing to prepare, and then at the state level as well there. And just a reminder, we'll send out these slides. Austin will send these out afterwards, so you'll have be able to refer back to these. And so my last slide is just a little bit of a recap of considerations surrounding activation. Again, those data sharing agreements, we've seen those as a barrier that can be possibly addressed a little bit earlier on so that communities can take action more quickly. We encourage folks to look at if they have any rep loss, severe rep loss, or substantial damage strategies or processes in place that will help identify potential properties for Swift Current that may be eligible. Again, that targeted outreach, we really have to get to the people that can qualify for this. So if there's any kind of at the local level, we know every community knows what works best for them. They know how to communicate with their citizens on things. So definitely leverage those things you have in place that are working well for you to get the word out about this particular opportunity. The state NFIP coordinator is great to talk to about potential substantial damage. If communities are need technical assistance on the substantial damage side, that NFIP coordinating office is fantastic with being able to provide technical assistance. We touched on the NFIP direct severe repetitive loss letters that can go out as well. We also talked about the tailored pre-application support that is available, and we definitely want you to make use of this if you have even an inkling of being able to of wanting help or identifying needs. We want to try to fill those. And then just quickly, just a summary here. I did divide it out by county for the state of where the number breakdown for NFIP insured. So this number represents properties that are NFIP insured and they have some kind of SRL or RL status, and they are currently not mitigated. So there's 149 that we're seeing across the state. Again, we broke it down by county here. I also have a community list as well that I'm happy to share with Austin if you'd like that. Again, this does not contain PII. It's just it's a number report, and so we can freely share that. But that really concludes the main slides that I wanted to go to. So Austin,